The night air was heavy, and I stood frozen outside the cafe window as my breath fogged the glass. Inside, my ex-boyfriend James laughed with her, the woman who thought she had stolen my place. Her hand brushed his as if claiming a prize that wasn't hers. My stomach twisted, yet I couldn't tear my eyes away. James had once told me, "You're the only one who makes me feel alive," and now those same words poured from his lips toward her. My chest pounded, each beat screaming betrayal. I felt the world tilt, like the ground beneath me cracked in half, forcing me into a darkness I wasn't ready for. Anger began to eclipse the hurt, a fire sparking where tears had threatened. I whispered to myself, if she thinks she's won, she's wrong. The cafe lights blurred as my vision swelled with rage. That moment was no longer about loss. It was about reclaiming my power. The game had just begun, and neither James nor his new girlfriend, Claire, knew the storm I was about to unleash. They looked untouchable in their perfect little bubble, but I promised myself that bubble would burst. The rain clung to my jacket as I hurried down the street, but it wasn't the cold that gnawed at me. It was betrayal, raw and jagged, tearing me apart from inside. I remembered the nights James promised we'd build a future, swearing loyalty like a sacred oath. Those promises now echoed like mockery in my mind. I clenched my fists harder, my nails biting into my palms, grounding me in the fury that was rising. Claire's smug face replayed itself in my memory, her laughter like poison dripping into my veins. She thought she had stolen my life, but all she had done was awaken a part of me I never knew existed. My voice cracked in the downpour as I muttered, "You will regret underestimating me." Each step I took splashed against the pavement, each one louder than the storm above. The city felt like it was listening, its neon veins pulsing with my rage. This wasn't heartbreak anymore. It was the birth of revenge. I ducked under the flickering street lamp at the corner, the buzz in its wires almost as restless as my thoughts. My mind replayed James' lies, each memory twisted now with deceit. He hadn't loved me, not really. He had used me, discarded me, then paraded his new prize as if I were nothing. I wanted to scream, but instead I let the silence grow inside me. That silence was sharper than rage. It was focus. My reflection in a shop window stared back, a stranger with eyes that no longer belonged to the woman I used to be. I whispered to her, "You will take everything from them." The thought calmed me. This wasn't about jealousy, it was about justice. It was about showing them both that betrayal comes with a price. Lightning cracked above, splitting the sky as if it were echoing my rage. I remembered the way James had held me when I was at my lowest, promising safety, only to abandon me for her. That betrayal carved itself deeper with each flash. I gripped the lamppost, grounding myself, and for a moment I almost broke, almost let the grief consume me. But then I saw Claire's smile again in my mind, smug and victorious, and the grief transformed into iron resolve. "I'll make you choke on that smile," I growled to the storm. The rain drenched me fully now, but I didn't flinch. The storm outside was nothing compared to the one I was unleashing inside. I walked aimlessly until the rain eased into drizzle, the city quieter now, as though giving me space to decide. I thought about revenge, its cost, its power. Somewhere inside I heard the voice of reason telling me to walk away, but it was drowned out by another darker voice urging me on. I knew then that this wasn't about healing anymore. This was war. Claire had walked into my life thinking she'd taken what was hers. James had betrayed me thinking he'd escape consequences. They were both wrong. I smiled faintly to myself, the kind of smile that frightened even me. "It starts tonight," I whispered into the empty streets. My heart no longer trembled. It burned. Morning light crept through my blinds, but it felt like knives instead of warmth. My body ached from the storm the night before, yet my mind refused to rest. I stared at the ceiling, remembering James' empty promises. My heart twisted at the sound of his laughter still haunting my memory, mixing with Claire's voice like a cruel melody. I rose from bed, dragging myself to the mirror, and for a long moment I did not recognize the woman staring back. Her eyes were darker, colder. "This is not who you were," I whispered, and yet another voice inside replied, "This is who you need to be." I touched the mirror as if steadying a stranger. I would not be the fragile girl who cried herself to sleep anymore. I would become the storm they never saw coming. And I swore to myself, with every ounce of pain still burning in me, I would make them pay. The kitchen smelled faintly of coffee, but the taste turned bitter on my tongue. I sat at the table, staring at the steaming cup, unable to take another sip. My phone buzzed with messages, friends asking how I was, pretending to care. I ignored them. Their words were meaningless now. What mattered was the silence, the kind that gave me space to plan. I remembered how James once sat across from me at this very table, promising forever. The ghost of his smile lingered in this room, taunting me. I clenched the mug until the heat seared my palm, grounding me in reality. The past was gone, but the anger remained, and I knew then that I would no longer waste my tears. I whispered to myself, pain can become power. That truth became sharper than the coffee, stronger than the silence, and far more intoxicating than love. By afternoon, I found myself walking aimlessly through the park. The sky was heavy, gray clouds rolling slowly, as if mirroring my mood. Children laughed in the distance, their joy mocking the storm inside me. I sat on a bench, watching couples pass, hands entwined, careless and smug. My throat tightened as memories of James' hand, once fitting perfectly in mine, surged back. Rage threatened to choke me, but I refused to let it show. I straightened my back, staring ahead. Love had been a weapon used against me, but I would sharpen it into my own blade. Claire thought she had won, but her victory was shallow, hollow. "You'll never know peace," I muttered, voice shaking yet resolute. For the first time, I realized that revenge wasn't just about them. It was about me reclaiming control. As I left the park, the city streets buzzed with noise, but it all felt distant, muted against the roar in my head. Billboards screamed promises of happiness and success, lies as empty as James' vows. I passed a jewelry store, its display glinting with gold and diamonds, and my reflection stared back from the glass. I remembered the night James gave me a necklace, whispering it symbolized forever. Now forever belonged to someone else, and the memory curdled in my stomach. My fists clenched as I whispered, "Symbols can be broken." I let the words linger in the cold air. This city had taken everything from me, but it would also be the stage for my revenge. Every bright light and polished smile would only make their downfall more satisfying. I walked on, fueled not by grief anymore, but by hunger. By evening I returned home, the city's noise fading behind me. My apartment felt both like a cage and a sanctuary. I threw my jacket across the chair and stood in the silence, listening to my own breathing. I had spent too long drowning in memories, too long letting their betrayal define me. Not anymore. I sat at my desk, opening my journal, the one place my thoughts lived free of judgment. My pen scraped across the paper, words spilling like venom. I wrote their names, James and Claire, and beneath them, a single word: payback. The ink bled into the page like blood seeping into fabric. My hands trembled, but not from fear. It was anticipation. That night, I swore I would not rest until my justice was served. Tomorrow, the real game would begin. The night had returned, and with it came my resolve. I sat in the corner of a dim bar, the kind of place where broken souls went to drown their demons. My eyes scanned the crowd, searching for the first thread to pull in this tangled web. The alcohol buzzed faintly in the air, but I wasn't here for escape. I was here for clarity. James had always been careless, and Claire arrogant. That combination would be their undoing. A man at the next table eyed me curiously, but I ignored him, tracing the rim of my glass instead. My mind was already drawing lines, connections, and cracks in their perfect facade. I whispered to myself, "Every empire falls." The bartender gave me a questioning look, but I offered only a faint smile. Tonight was the first step. the beginning of something neither of them would ever see coming. The next day, sunlight poured across my desk as I dug into James' world. His social media was a gallery of lies, polished smiles, and curated happiness. Claire was everywhere in his feed, her hand gripping his arm like a trophy claim. But beneath the gloss I saw patterns, gaps in their story, cracks waiting to widen. I scribbled notes furiously, arrows connecting names, dates, and places. It felt less like heartbreak now, and more like strategy. My chest tightened with each discovery, but instead of pain I felt adrenaline. "You've given me everything I need," I whispered at his smiling face on the screen. For the first time since the betrayal, I felt in control again. Revenge wasn't just an idea anymore, it was a plan taking shape. By evening, I found myself sitting across from Michael, my reluctant ally. He had been a friend once, before James pushed him out of our circle. Now he sat with arms crossed, suspicion written all over his face. "You're asking me to betray him," he said, voice low, as if afraid of the words themselves. I leaned forward, meeting his gaze. "No, I'm asking you to tell the truth. You know what he's done." Silence stretched between us, thick and uneasy. I could see the conflict in his eyes, the tug of loyalty against the weight of betrayal. Finally, his shoulders slumped. "I'll help you," he muttered, though doubt still laced his tone. I allowed myself the faintest smile. Another piece had fallen into place. Later that night I met with someone I never thought I'd turn to, Olivia, my old mentor. She had lived her life scarred by betrayal, a story written in the lines of her weathered face. "Revenge is a dangerous road," she warned, her voice steady yet burdened by memory. I felt her words press against my resolve, but I refused to bend. "I'm not asking for your approval," I replied. "I need guidance." Olivia studied me for a long moment, her eyes searching for the girl I used to be. What she found instead was steel. She sighed, finally nodding. "If you go down this path, you need to be prepared to lose yourself." Her warning lingered like smoke in the air. Still, I walked out more determined than ever. The night ended on my balcony, city lights stretching like fireflies against the dark. I leaned on the railing, feeling the cold metal bite into my palms. For the first time, I wasn't just reacting. I was building. The plan was fragile, yes, but it had shape. I could almost see Jameson's downfall, almost hear Claire's perfect laughter crumble into silence. My chest tightened with both fear and excitement, two forces colliding within me. "This is the edge," I whispered into the night, "and I'm ready to jump." The city hummed beneath me, unaware of the storm that had just been set in motion. Their betrayal had given me purpose. Now, it was time to strike. The first move had to be small, precise, a whisper of chaos rather than a scream. I followed Claire to her favorite boutique, watching her glide through racks of dresses as if she owned the world. She smiled at the mirror, twirling in a silk gown, unaware of me and the reflection behind her. I slipped a note into her designer purse, 5 words written in black ink: "You took what wasn't yours." She wouldn't know where it came from, and that uncertainty was the point. I left before she saw me, heart pounding like a drum. This wasn't about striking hard yet. It was about seeding fear. Every empire crumbles when cracks begin to spread, and I wanted her to feel the fracture in her perfect glass life. Tonight, Claire would look over her shoulder and wonder who was watching. That evening, Jameson's car sat gleaming outside his apartment, pride polished into every curve. I crouched low, the city hum masking my movements. With gloved hands I scratched a single word across the hood with a key: liar daughter. It wasn't about destruction. It was about humiliation. About sending a message carved into the object he loved most after himself. I stepped back, admiring the scar in the metal, knowing his reflection would meet that word every time he looked. My pulse throbbed with adrenaline, fear buzzing at the edges, but satisfaction won. For years I had been silent. Now the silence was over. James would finally learn what betrayal tasted like when the tables turned. I watched from across the street as James stormed outside, his rage echoing in the way he slammed the car door shut. Claire followed, her heels clattering against the pavement. They argued, voices sharp, cutting through the night. I couldn't hear their words, but I didn't need to. The way she folded her arms, the way he jabbed a finger at the scarred hood, said everything. Cracks were forming just as I planned. My lips curled into a quiet smile, the sound of their fight like music to me. For the first time in months, I felt powerful again. This wasn't just revenge. It was balance being restored, piece by piece. And I was only just beginning. The sidekick's voice was in my ear again, heavy with hesitation. Michael called me reckless, warned that James wasn't stupid, that Claire wouldn't stay blind forever. His words scraped against my pride, but I refused to let them in. Do you want him to keep winning? I hissed. Silence answered, then a broken sigh. Michael was right about one thing. I was pushing boundaries. But that was the point. I needed James off balance. I needed Claire paranoid. Fear was a disease, and I was patient zero. When I hung up the call, my hands shook, but not from doubt. From hunger. Every step into the dark made me stronger, and I wasn't about to stop. The storm broke inside me as I stood at the edge of their world. I had mapped their routines, their weaknesses, their blind spots. James was unraveling, Claire uneasy, and all of it was because of me. But the question lingered, how far was I willing to go? Olivia's warning replayed in my mind. Revenge consumes more than it gives. I pressed my palms against the railing of the bridge, the city lights flickering below like fragile stars. My reflection on the water wavered, split by ripples, two selves staring back. One still human, one already lost. I whispered into the night, "You pushed me here. Now you'll watch me fall." The choice had been made. There was no turning back. The pieces began to shift when I discovered something I hadn't expected. Claire wasn't just James' new lover. She had known him long before I came into the picture. Old photos surfaced, hidden in archives he thought were private, their smiles captured years before he ever met me. My stomach twisted, betrayal growing roots deeper than I imagined. All this time, she hadn't stolen him. She had been waiting, watching, lurking in the background. Suddenly, the smugness in her eyes made sense. It wasn't chance, it was a plan. "You were always there," I whispered to the photo, my voice shaking with fury. This wasn't a love triangle. It was a seat up from the beginning, and I was the fool they laughed at together. But fools don't stay fools forever. I stormed into Michael's apartment, shoving the evidence into his hands. He skimmed through the photos, his brow furrowing, jaw tightening. "They played you," he said finally, voice heavy with reluctant pity. I wanted to scream, to break something, but instead I stood rigid, every muscle locked. "They used me," I spat. Michael looked at me with sympathy, but beneath it was fear. He had seen enough to know what came next. "Don't let them take more than they already have," he urged, but I shook my head. It was too late for warnings. Too late for sympathy. If Claire had orchestrated this all along, she wasn't just guilty of betrayal. She was guilty of cruelty. And cruelty deserved no mercy. The truth burned in my chest as I walked the streets that night, the city buzzing like it knew my secret. Every passerby blurred into faceless shadows, but in my mind, I saw Claire's smile over and over. This wasn't about James anymore. He was just a pawn, blind to the strings tied around him. Claire was the puppeteer, the one who had taken joy in my suffering, and I wanted her to feel the same fire she had lit in me. I stopped beneath a glowing billboard, its artificial smile taunting me with perfection. My fists clenched, nails biting into my palms, grounding me in rage. "This is your war now," I muttered into the night air. Claire thought she had won. She was about to learn that nothing burns brighter than vengeance born from betrayal. When I finally confronted Olivia, I expected wisdom. Maybe sympathy. Instead, her face hardened as I laid out the truth. She knew. She had known all along. My chest hollowed as her silence confirmed it. "I warned you for a reason," she whispered. Betrayal stacked itself like bricks in my chest, heavier with each breath. Olivia, my mentor, my guide, had withheld the one truth that mattered most. "You let me walk blind into their game," I growled, rage thick in my throat. She didn't deny it. Instead, she looked at me with something almost like sorrow. But sorrow was worthless now. The ground beneath me cracked again, deeper this time, pulling me further into the abyss. I wasn't just fighting James and Claire anymore. I was fighting a world that wanted me to lose. That night I returned home, shattered but sharper than ever. Every lie had been revealed, every mask ripped away. Claire wasn't just a rival, she was a predator. James wasn't a lover, he was a fool. Olivia wasn't a mentor, she was a coward. My world had collapsed, but from its ruins I felt something new take root. Clarity. I sat at my desk again, pen in hand, but this time the words weren't shaky or venomous. They were sharp, clean, and final. I wrote their names one by one, then drew a line through each. Above them all, I wrote one word, end. For the first time, my breathing slowed. For the first time I felt calm. This was no longer revenge. This was war, and I had already won in my mind. The night of reckoning arrived under a blood-red sunset. I stood across the street from James' apartment, watching the warm glow of his window like a beacon. Inside, laughter floated faintly. Claire's shrill joy carried into the street. My chest burned. This wasn't imagination anymore. It was action. I walked forward, each step deliberate, heavy with purpose. My fists tingled, my pulse thrummed. The key I had slipped from Michael's pocket days ago was cold in my palm. At the door, I hesitated for only a breath before sliding it into the lock. The click was soft, almost delicate, belying the storm it unleashed. I whispered to myself, "Tonight, everything ends." The door creaked open, and I slipped inside, the apartment glowing with the kind of perfection that mocked me. Claire was on the couch, her laughter filling the room, James seated beside her with a wine glass raised. They froze when they saw me. The silence that followed was thick, stretching like a blade between us. James' face shifted from shock to anger, but Claire's smirk cracked almost instantly. "What are you doing here?" he demanded, voice sharp. I stepped forward, every nerve on fire. "Finishing what you started," I said. My voice sounded foreign to me, calm, steady, terrifying. For the first time, I saw fear flicker in their eyes, and that fear tasted sweeter than any love ever had. James leapt to his feet, rage coloring his face, but I didn't flinch. "You've gone too far," he growled, trying to control the moment like he always had. Claire shrank slightly, her hand tightening around the edge of the couch. I let the silence hang before pulling the photos from my coat pocket, the ones proving Claire's long-hidden history with him. I tossed them onto the table, their faces drained of color. "You thought I wouldn't find out," I hissed. James opened his mouth, but no words came. Claire's eyes darted between us, her confidence collapsing. The truth shattered their unity, leaving cracks I had carved myself. My voice dropped to a whisper. "This ends with you broken." Claire tried to speak, her voice trembling, but James snapped at her, his anger spilling out like venom. They turned on each other, their alliance unraveling in front of me. The words they hurled were jagged, accusations they had buried until now. I stood silent, letting the chaos breathe. Watching them destroy each other was sweeter than anything I could have said. Claire finally looked at me, tears welling. "This is your fault," she spat. I tilted my head, calm. "No, this is yours." My tone carved into her more deeply than any blade. James slammed his fist against the wall, veins bulging in fury. For the first time, they were fractured, and I was the one holding the hammer. The climax was silent, not loud. Claire's tears spilled, James's rage burned, but I simply turned toward the door. My work was done. They had destroyed themselves with the truths I revealed. As I walked away, their voices cracked the air. Shouts, sobs, desperate pleas. None of it mattered anymore. I had taken what they valued most: control. My footsteps echoed down the hall, each one lighter than the last. I wasn't free, not yet, but for the first time I felt power truly in my hands. Let them rot in their ruin, I whispered. Behind me, their empire crumbled. Ahead of me, the night opened like a promise of more. The city was quiet that night, as if it knew something had ended. I wandered the empty streets, neon lights flickering above me. My chest felt hollow but not broken. Revenge hadn't filled the void, it had reshaped it. The silence was heavy, but within it was clarity. For once I wasn't the girl James had betrayed, or the rival Claire had mocked. I was something else, something stronger. I whispered to myself, "You survive." The words felt strange, almost foreign, but real. The rain began to fall again, cool against my skin, washing away the last remnants of weakness. Michael found me sitting on a park bench, the drizzle soaking us both. His eyes searched mine, hesitant but steady. "Did it help?" he asked softly. I considered the question, the truth heavy in my chest. "It didn't fix me," I admitted, "but it freed me." He nodded, silent, his loyalty a quiet anchor against the storm of my choices. For once I didn't push him away. For once, I let someone stay. Maybe revenge wasn't redemption, but it was survival. And survival was enough. For now. The next morning, I stood in front of the mirror once again. This time, the reflection wasn't a stranger. My eyes were still darker, colder, but I recognized them now. They belonged to someone who had walked through fire and come out scarred, yet standing. The past hadn't vanished, the betrayal still lingered like smoke, but it no longer defined me. "You're still here," I whispered. And for the first time, it wasn't a plea. It was a fact. The girl who had been broken was gone. In her place stood someone who knew her strength. Olivia appeared one last time, unannounced, standing in the doorway of my apartment. Her eyes carried sorrow, but I didn't flinch. "You've changed," she said softly. I met her gaze with calm steel. "You warned me, but I chose anyway." She nodded, silence stretching between us like old wounds that would never close. Then, without another word, she turned and left. I didn't follow. I didn't need her approval anymore. I had carved my own path, even if it had been paved in fire. Some bonds break forever, and that's okay. That night, I stood again on the bridge, the city stretching below me like veins of light. The air was cold, sharp, alive. I closed my eyes, inhaling deeply, feeling the weight of everything I had endured. Then I smiled, not out of joy, but out of survival. James and Claire were broken. Olivia was gone, but I was still here. The silence was heavy, but within it lived strength. I whispered into the night, "The end is mine." And in that whisper was freedom.